Hurricane Beryl was a destructive and deadly Category 5 Atlantic hurricane that impacted sections of the Caribbean, the Yucatan Peninsula, and the Gulf Coast of the United States in late June to early July 2024. It was historic as the earliest form in Category 5 on record in the Atlantic and the first hurricane for the 2024 season. Beryl originated from a tropical wave of low pressure that moved off the African coast on June 22nd. Beryl first formed as a tropical depression on June 28 at 5 p.m. with winds of 35 miles or 56 kilometers per hour. Within 6 hours after forming, it was upgraded to a tropical storm, having sustained winds over 39 miles or 63 kilometers per hour. The storm rapidly intensified and within 24 hours, or on June 29 at 11 p.m., it was upgraded into a hurricane with winds of 75 miles or 120 kilometers per hour. At the time, it was situated about 720 miles or 1,162 kilometers east-southeast of Barbados. Within 24 hours after becoming a hurricane, it again rapidly intensified for a second time to become a Category 4 hurricane, becoming the first Category 4 hurricane in history to form in the month of June. This was the farthest east that a hurricane had formed in the month of June. It continued its journey across the Atlantic Ocean, then through the Caribbean Sea, making its first landfall on the island of Carriacou in Grenada. It then continued through the Caribbean to the Bay of Campeche, making another landfall in Tulum, Quintana Roo, southern Mexico, as a high-end Category 2 hurricane on July 5. It then weakened into a tropical storm over the Yucatan Peninsula before moving across the Gulf of Mexico. It gained some strength and continued to where it made the final landfall as a Category 1 hurricane at an area near Matagorda, Texas on July 8 with sustained winds of 80 miles or 130 kilometers per hour, after which the storm quickly weakened inland, transitioning to a post-tropical cyclone on July 9 and finally dissipated on July 11, subsequently completing a journey of over 6,000 miles or 9,700 kilometers in just 19 days, traveling at an average speed of 22 miles or 35 kilometers per hour after becoming a hurricane. Hi, I am Raymond from Best Fruits in Jamaica. In this video, I will share some of the historic facts on Hurricane Beryl, along with some of the disruption it caused to the areas it encountered, with special emphasis mainly on some of Jamaica's agricultural sectors during its passage off the south coast of Jamaica on July 3, 2024. A hurricane is a tropical storm with winds that have reached a constant speed of 74 miles or 119 kilometers per hour or more. A hurricane consists of an eye surrounded by an eye wall with spiral rain bands on the outside. The eye can be described as an almost circular opening in the middle of the hurricane, having little or no clouds above it. It is very calm, having little to no winds blowing inside. From inside the eye, you can look up to see either the sun by day or stars and moon by night. It is within the eye that you find the minimum central pressure of the hurricane. It is usually 20 to 40 miles or 32 to 64 kilometers across. Surrounding the eye is the eye wall. A small eye and a compact eye wall are two of the major characteristics of a more powerful hurricane. The eye wall contains the area of strongest winds, which always blow in an anti-clockwise direction, west to east, within the northern hemisphere. Around the eye, it also features intense thunderstorms and heavy rains. The hurricane may be over 400 miles or 643 kilometers wide and could have clouds extending to an altitude of up to 50,000 feet. or over 15,240 meters. It is often associated with dangers that may include torrential rains, destructive winds, landslides, high surf and rip currents, storm surge flooding, severe inland flooding from heavy rains, and tornadoes. Hurricane Beryl entered the Caribbean Sea after two rounds of rapid intensification on July 1st, 2024, thereby making its first landfall on the Grenadian island of Carriacou as a Category 4 hurricane with destructive winds reaching over 150 miles or 241 kilometers per hour and life-threatening storm surge. With the strength of the surge and speed of the wind, it only required half an hour to create a chaos never before seen on the island. At almost the same time, it was also impacting St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for which the government later warned of possible food shortages. It continued through the Caribbean Sea, where it borders the northeastern states of Venezuela on the South American mainland, battering whatever was in its path, with Sucre being the worst affected state in the sections of the country bordered by the Caribbean Sea. Beryl continued to track through the Caribbean Sea, slowly gaining strength, with the next target being Jamaica. On July 2nd, 2024, Beryl became the earliest Category 5 hurricane in the tropical Atlantic on record and only the second Category 5 hurricane to occur in July. At maximum strength, Beryl had sustained winds of 165 miles or 266 kilometers per hour, a minimum central pressure of 934 millibars or 27.1 inches of mercury. Fortunately for Jamaica, the conditions within the Caribbean waters from Grenada to Jamaica was neither favorable for it to undergo any more rapid intensification to increase its strength, nor to maintain the wind speed at which it had peaked earlier on July 2nd before it reached Jamaica. As a consequence of some resulting wind shear, which had started within the Jamaican area a few days before Hurricane Beryl's arrival. The wind shear is a difference in wind speed and/or direction over relatively short distance in the atmosphere. Wind shear hurts tropical cyclones by removing the heat and moisture that they need from the area near their center. Shear will also distort the shape of the hurricane, blowing the top away from the lower portion so that the vortex or low pressure center is tilted, as was the case with Beryl, which was probably one of the reasons why this hurricane did not have much water, as only 4 inches or 101.6 millimeters of rain was measured by my rain gauge. The wind shear was blowing in a different direction to that which the hurricane was moving and was strong enough not only to prevent the speed of the hurricane from increasing but also to reduce it marginally. Hurricane Beryl entered Jamaican territorial waters closer to midnight on July 2nd. By the time the first set of winds had reached Jamaican shores on July 3rd, the hurricane was then a high Category 4 with slightly lower wind speed than which it had peaked earlier on the day before. It however continued to weaken extremely slowly. Southeast Jamaica was a bit fortunate in that the hurricane had drifted further south of the island in its approach, thus sparing the more populated areas of Kingston and St. Catherine the worst damage as it passed just 45 miles or 72 kilometers south of Kingston, having sustained wind speed between 140 and 156 miles or 225 and 251 kilometers per hour. Nevertheless, by the time the center of the hurricane had passed along coastline south of St. Catherine, the center of the hurricane started drifting closer towards the island in a west-northwest direction at a pace of 22 miles or 35 kilometers per hour, resulting in Clarendon, Manchester, and St. Elizabeth getting some of the stronger winds of the hurricane while it was still a very devastating storm. This proved to be very catastrophic, especially for St. Elizabeth, often referred to as the breadbasket parish of the Jamaican nation. In some areas, the storm was estimated to be accompanied by up to 12 inches or 305 millimeters of rainfall. Therefore, the high levels of rainfall, coupled with the strength of the winds, flooding in some areas, along with combinations of some deterioration of existing infrastructures such as roads, drains, and electrical utility poles. The storm did bring quite a havoc to Jamaica. However, it also became the first hurricane and earliest storm on record to reach the strongest possible ranking of Category 5 near Jamaica. It never made landfall in Jamaica, however it almost did so on July 3rd at approximately 5 p.m. when the center of the storm was offshore the coastline of St. Elizabeth, as the center of the storm seemed to have made its nearest approach to the island at that time. For a hurricane to make landfall, the center or eye of the storm has to at least pass over the coastline of the landmass or country. Hurricane winds extended outwards to 45 miles or 75 kilometers from the center, while tropical storm force wind extended 185 miles or 295 kilometers. From a crop production perspective, Hurricane Beryl did immensely serious damages to the sector. The country was just recovering from an extremely severe drought in some of the main agricultural areas. A close friend of mine, who has a rain gauge on his farm to monitor the daily rainfall quantities, told me that for 2024, the rainfall from January to the end of April total only 24 inches or 601 millimeters. And this was so bad that some of his crops which should have flowered during that time either did not flower or had very little fruit set for the period. The data from his records also showed that for May, rainfall totaled 20 inches or 508 millimeters, while for June it was 29 inches or 737 millimeters, or almost 1 inch or 25 millimeters per day. This would have brought the soil on his farm almost to the point of saturation and softness. Therefore, it would not take much for trees that were not deeply rooted or had weakened root system to topple over under strong winds. During a drought, a lot of plant roots will naturally die as water becomes scarce. Therefore, most plants at this time would have weakened root systems. Hence, as the rain had just restarted, most plants would have just started to regrow and re-strengthen their root systems, which were still in a weak state. Thus, with a devastating hurricane like Beryl so early in the season, the roots of those plants would have yet to regain their strength and ability to anchor the plant. Thus, it was no surprise why so many of the plants toppled over when subjected to a combination of saturated soils and Beryl immensely strong winds. Observing a hurricane from a place where you were bunkered down, it is usually hard to imagine how devastating the overall effect of the hurricane would be from your limited view of the outside area. Yet, from where I was sheltering and what I was looking at, I realized that there was a possibility that it was going to be a very destructive storm. As is often the case, after the passage of a hurricane, the rains often continued into the night, which was what happened with Beryl. I was up early the following morning to find that Hurricane Beryl was no different from any of the major hurricanes that had previously impacted Jamaica. There were destruction all around. From a crop production perspective, bananas and plantains are among the most susceptible crops to hurricanes, and for this one, it was no different, as in the fields, they were shown damages of over 70 to 75%. Looking around the neighborhood, it was almost impossible to find a crop that was not damaged by the hurricane. Debris were everywhere. In some instances, the landscape had changed so much to the extent that this bird hawk which had lived in the area for more than a year, seemed extremely confused as he inspected some of his favorite trees and places that he had probably perched on almost every day while he waited around, searching the ground below for his daily meals of mainly insects to feed on, as some of them were now lying on the ground or their limbs broken off. Of all the crops around me, the least damaged was coconut. Notwithstanding, coconut might be one of the most tolerant crops to hurricanes because of the following characteristics: flexibility of the trunks and leaves to bend significantly without breaking during heavy winds. The circular shape of the trees offers less resistance to the wind. The reduced exposed surface area to the wind, such as the absence of branches and their strong root system. Even though the tree is a monocotyledon, nonetheless, it has thousands of strong individual fibrous roots closely intertwined, which work together as one unit to anchor the plant firmly in the soil. Despite these facts, you will still find occasional trees either blown down, broken at the root, sometimes the trunk snapping in two, leaves sometimes broken by the wind, and growing points or shoots often damaged by other trees falling on them. Among coconut trees that usually get damaged in a hurricane are usually those trees planted in shallow soils and more stony areas, some which were volunteer plants, and old trees that were either infested by insects and birds, such as woodpeckers, which sometimes make holes in them for nesting. Few days after the passage of the hurricane, a radio station reported that a spokesperson for the coconut industry issued a statement saying that over 90% of the coconut trees planted on the island did not suffer any significant damage. Some of the other crops which were not significantly damaged were pineapple, sweet potato, coffee, and cocoa. Cocos, also known as cocoyams or edos, at least in the area that I had observed. Maybe because the plants were protected by some of the taller trees and mountain ridges which acted as windbreakers around them. Also, the closer to the ground level the crops are, the lower is the speed of the wind that reaches them, and the greater the chances of survival for the shorter crops. These are corn seedlings that were photographed the morning after the hurricane, yet they miraculously survived to later reach this stage 60 days after the hurricane. Yet the cedar tree beside them was crudely pruned by the wind. Not much vegetable was in season at the time of the hurricane in areas close to me, except a few Scotch bonnet pepper plants, most of which were affected by the hurricane. Among the other crops that were significantly damaged were avocados, mostly referred to as pear by Jamaicans, and sometimes zabuka by some of the people from the Eastern Caribbean. They were either uprooted or had broken branches at several different sections. Some grafted trees were broken at the point of attachment of the stock to the scion, especially if the tree was stockwork or grafted onto a young shoot of a fully matured tree trunk or rootstock, in which case the scion would have grown quite vigorously, but because the growing scion might still be in the mature or juvenile stage, some will easily snap under the continuous blowing from all directions by the wind. For scions that were grafted to smaller stock sizes, for which growth was not as rapid as those with larger rootstocks, most survived, such as these. In addition, because the main avocado season usually begins in Jamaica in July, a lot of trees which had fruits on them lost almost everything. This was extremely bad, as already the coming avocado crop was on a path to become one of the worst in Jamaica's history as a result of the drought conditions which the country had just passed through, coupled with the immensely hot daily temperatures experienced earlier in the year due to climate change conditions that most countries of the world are currently experiencing these days. Other trees, especially tall ones, ranging from edible crops to timber, were also significantly damaged. Here we can see damages to breadfruit trees, June plum or golden apple, star apple or kaimato, custard apple blown to the ground, long gone, splitting at the trunk and blown down, rollinia blown down, orange blown down, jackfruit trees with broken limbs and fallen fruit, and rambutan that were completely torn out of the ground, which will eventually die like this one, while others were lying on the ground with their roots still feeding the now horizontal shoots. Jamaican apple or cocoa plum with torn off trunks, and cedar trees, which is one of the premium timber grown in Jamaica, with all the growing points broken off. Hurricane Beryl was believed to have Category 4 status as it traveled along the entire Jamaican south coast, and it was only after leaving the Jamaican area that it was downgraded to Category 3. The eye of the hurricane was approximately 110 miles or 177 kilometers southeast of Grand Cayman at 2 a.m. Eastern Time on July 4th. It was by this time downgraded to a Category 3 hurricane with maximum wind speed up to 125 miles or 201 kilometers per hour, which was near or at major hurricane intensity. As it passes southwest of Grand Cayman in the Cayman Islands. In the Eastern Caribbean, the worst damages were in Grenada and its major dependencies of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, followed by St. Vincent and the Grenadines. For Grenada, Carriacou and Petit Martinique, Beryl caused immense damages to water supply, electricity supply, communications networks, logistics, most buildings, some of which were totally destroyed, and agriculture. Grenada was ranked the 10th largest producer of nutmeg in the world for 2023, for which nutmeg was the major agricultural export earner for the islands. The hurricane will therefore have a negative effect on the country's agricultural earnings within the next few years, as most of the trees would have been damaged by the hurricane. Large boats were overturned, while a lot of residents on all affected islands had to resort to tarpaulins for covering their displaced or damaged roofs throughout most of the communities affected by the hurricane. There were also reports from Carriacou saying concrete walls of buildings had collapsed or broken down, which was probably the result of the storm's surge and waves, while vehicles and 40-foot containers were seen floating around in the waves and surge from the hurricane. Some reports from Carriacou and Petite Martinique painted a picture of almost total devastation in both dependencies. Among the damages were early reports from authorities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines saying that 90% of the buildings on the country's Union Island were flattened and that the country could face food shortages as 50% of bananas and plantain fields were lost, in addition to significant losses in root crops and vegetables. In Venezuela, early reports were that there were almost 8,000 homes that were damaged, in addition to 360 that were totally destroyed, with close to 150 commercial businesses affected, in addition to 6 schools. 6 people were also confirmed dead, while 3 were missing, with an undetermined amount injured. Hurricane Beryl was extremely destructive to the Jamaican economy. The price tag of the damage caused to Jamaica's agriculture sector was only one aspect of its total cost. For example, it was reported that in Jamaica, over 400,000 electricity consumers, or 65% of Jamaica Public Service customers, were without power immediately after the passage of the hurricane. In addition, the disruption in Jamaica's electricity supply was so great that at the end of the 7th week after the passage of the hurricane, Some homes and businesses were still waiting for repairs to the power lines to be done so that they could be reconnected to the main electrical grid. Also, hundreds of homes and other buildings were damaged, along with 92 schools, which were severely affected and rapidly needed to be repaired in preparation for the coming school year. Jamaican officials warned of potential food shortages after estimating that Beryl had destroyed over 6.4 million US dollars in food crops and their supporting infrastructures such as shade houses. These, in addition to other local damages, was enough to activate the Jamaican government's tropical cyclone policy with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, resulting in a payout of approximately 16.1 million United States dollars to Jamaica. Therefore, all the damages will undoubtedly push the total cost of the hurricane extremely high in Jamaica. Although the actual eye of Beryl was however far enough south of the Cayman Islands, the winds were strong enough to damage the more susceptible crops such as bananas, plantains, and various fruit trees, especially on Grand Cayman. However, there were no significant major damage to any infrastructure on the islands. In Mexico, there were no death or injury, with only minor damages and disruptions such as the tens of thousands of individuals who lost electricity, especially in Tulum, where Beryl made its second landfall. In Texas, Beryl had knocked out electricity supply to over 2.7 million homes and businesses after becoming a post-tropical cyclone. Beryl refused to go quietly as people from across the country, from the Mississippi, Ohio valleys, and northeast, had to clean up from tornadoes and flooding brought about by the remnants of Beryl. The remnants of Beryl did manage to reach Canada. However, by that time, most of the wind power was gone, and it was not able to do any serious damage, having lost all its strength. However, it still managed to bring 2 days of heavy rains to Ontario. It was estimated by a notable catastrophe risk modeling company in the United States that private insurance companies could expect close to 500 million US dollars in losses from the Caribbean region as a result of damages caused by Hurricane Beryl. In Mexico, it was estimated that the cost could reach US $90 million, while for the United States, it was found that the storm was responsible for $2.7 billion in privately insured losses. Hurricane Beryl was directly responsible for 33 deaths, 12 across the English-speaking Caribbean, consisting of 4 in Jamaica, 1 in Grenada, 2 in Carriacou, 6 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 6 along the Caribbean coast of Venezuela in South America, and 14 in the United States, consisting of 11 in the Greater Houston area, 1 in Louisiana, and 2 in Vermont. However, additional deaths that occurred as an indirect result of the storm, especially in the United States, as a result of massive heat waves and loss of electricity after the storm, had pushed the total to 70. I hope that you have enjoyed watching this video, just like how I have enjoyed presenting it to you. If you like it, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. And please remember to like and share it with your friends. Before I go, I will urgently remind you that the route of Hurricane Beryl came about partially because of climate change effects. If we do not slow it down, we will get extremely more devastating storms in the future. Please do whatever you can to stop it. We did. So can you. Thank you for watching and subscribing. Please take care of yourself and others, but most of all, our planet, Earth. It is the only habitable place we know.